Stress is the #1 killer in America. And what's really interesting is that in Chinese medicine, before they even address like nutrition, they actually address stress, which would really just be a lifestyle, before they even start to apply certain nutritional suggestions. And when we look at stress, we see that there's a correlation to a hormone known as cortisol, which they actually deem it the stress hormone. And this hormone we need a little bit of, but the problem is that when it gets elevated, everything kind of expels from out from the body. So what would that mean? It means like your digestion is pretty much shot. Your ability to assimilate nutrients is shot. Your ability to produce, serotonin and all the feel-good molecules that make you thrive and feel well is pretty much shot. And when I say shot, I mean it's non-existent. It's not happening. So you feel like crap. You feel like your world's ending. Even if you're the richest man in Babylon, if you're stressed out, you don't feel like the richest man in Babylon. And so this is something that's very important. And something that I want to kind of talk about today is some things you can do to help mitigate that stress. And the #1 thing you can do is just breathe consciously, not unconsciously. And I work in a clinic and I see people every day, and I always ask them, when I first see them, if I see that stress is an issue, I say, take a deep breath. And they always do this. And you see like all this with my shoulders, right? Really, they want to be breathing down here in the belly, like that. And that's like one of the #1 things you can do to help reduce stress instantly. It's free. You don't have to take a break at work. You could literally do it in front of your computer. Your boss would never know. No one would ever know, but you. And it instantly starts to kind of lower that cortisol. But a lot of times you can do these techniques like breathing and whatnot, and now obviously that's applying it to your life in a lifestyle manner, applying a tool to your life in a manner outside nutrition. But the second thing that I've done, and I've given to thousands of people, and it's always worked. It's always worked really, really well when it's applied in the right dosage and for the right person, and that's holy basil. The problem though that I've had with holy basil is that it tastes terrible, and it's really hard to take. And as you guys know, I'm anti-capsule. Because with capsules, the problem is we don't really taste the herb. So even though holy basil might not taste great, it's actually extremely beneficial for us to taste it, because then it starts to activate certain organs and meridians in the body that are probably more or less stagnant, which are also part of why we're stressed out, because the body's not functioning optimally. So you really do want to taste it. The other thing that I've had a hard time with is I saw a lot of standardized products on the market, and that's typically what you see out of all the new companies now and even old companies that they say they sell super herbs or herbs. They're really just selling standardized products, standardized herbs. And what that means is they typically will use like a volatile solvent like methane or hexane, which is extremely toxic. Like, they would kill us if we just drank it straight. But they use that to extract the active constituents, or what science is saying are the active constituents. And even though that might sound great on left brain on paper, it's actually terrible to actually get that herb to work in the body when you extract it that way. It's terrible, because what ends up happening is you end up throwing off the terpenes, the smells and the flavors, and you start to denature certain compounds that are extremely volatile, like they're extremely sensitive. So what ends up happening is that you get a subpar extract. And so what we've found as we keep educating ourselves more and more is that we really don't absorb nutrients. Bacteria do, and we are made of more bacteria than we have cells. And we're also learning that, and I'm learning this in farming, which correlates over to the human health and well-being, which is why I'm so involved in the farming. We're finding out that like bacteria and fungi, they communicate between themselves and through each other through what's called terpene signaling. And so what does that mean? That means that the terpenes, or the smells or the aromas, are how bacteria communicate to themselves and how they communicate to the fungus. Also how they communicate to the plants. Well, the same thing's happening to us. So when we eat something, and again, this is why fresh food's so important, right? And we all know that, right? We all know that fresh food is like where it's at. If you can go outside, pick all that fresh food, and you can eat it right then and there, that's like the most healthiest way that you can eat food. Grown organic, of course, or whatnot. And then grown, traditional Korean natural farming would make that even better, because you're using indigenous microbes, you're not buying inputs. I'm not going to go into that right now, though. That's another video for another time. But the idea is that when you pick something fresh off the vine that's vine ripened, it's at its peak ripeness or its peak terpene expression. So when you taste it, or when you pick it, you smell it, and that smell also acquires you to taste it. I don't know if you guys have ever noticed this, but if you close your nose and eat something, you don't taste it. But when you breathe and you put something on your palate, you now taste it. So this is something else you can kind of put in your mind's eye to help you kind of recognize what I'm talking about if I'm kind of going over your head about terpene expression. And the one thing that I really want to kind of hint on this is how important that is. And that kind of science of terpene signaling kind of explains why fresh food is so important. The other thing that I really want to get in on, and why I've kind of so excited about launching our new Holy Basil freeze-dried, is that it actually still has the terpenes inside of it, because all we're doing is pulling out the water. That's it. That's all we're doing. So there's no methane or hexane. This isn't even considered a cold water extraction, which we use in some of our formulas, and is way better because it doesn't use volatile compounds, but it's not as good as like fresh Holy Basil. This is the closest thing you're ever going to get to fresh Holy Basil picked vine when at its peak ripeness, is this product right here. And that's why you only have to take 1/8 of a teaspoon. That's a suggested serving size. Now I like to take about 1/4 teaspoon, and I like to take that about 2 to 3 times a day. But for an average person that just wants to help nurture their cortisol, that wants to help maybe with hypothyroidism, help support that, someone who's looking at to help heal the adrenals, even someone who's trying to help build their androgens, like their sex hormones, Holy Basil is where it's at. And one thing that's so cool about it is that the sages talk about, the yogis talk about how the Holy Basil, when you consume it, it creates an effect in the body of that of someone who just did a yoga session. So it makes you feel extremely like peaceful and zen, but you're not tired and wompy. So a lot of times in society, we think we need energy, like I don't have energy. But if your cortisol's high, the last thing you want to do is have like a stimulant like coffee every day, because that's just going to add fuel to your fire, and it's going to wipe out your adrenals even more in the long term. In short term, it'll boost you up, but even in the short term, your brain capacity, your IQ is dramatically decreasing because your cortisol is still high, and you just made it worse by drinking a stimulant. But something like Holy Basil will actually reduce that effect. It'll bring the cortisol down, which then will give you more energy, which then will allow you to focus better. And that's really cool, because now we can understand what we really need, instead of being basically being susceptible to BS marketing that's like energy now. Like, how many energy products are on the market, right? I mean, it's Quasimodo. And even for us, when people ask us, well, I just need more energy. If I don't say, oh, this is going to give you energy, then they don't want it. If I say, oh, this is going to calm you down, they're like, oh, well, I don't want that. I need energy. I don't need to be calmed down. But what they don't understand is that a lot of times their adrenals are so wiped and their cortisol so high that they do need to calm down in order to create more energy, because they need to restore. They need to restore their body. But what's so cool about Holy Basil also is that it's an adaptogen. So it has both properties of a stimulant in a small form, but also has the opposite properties of like nourishment and repair. And what's so cool is that through that terpene signaling to the bacteria, and since those bacteria are connected to our body, they will know which part to assimilate from the herb. And that's what an adaptogen is, though. An adaptogen can give you energy, or it can bring you down based on what you need. Well, who knows what you need? The bacterium do in your body. They know what's unbalanced because they're doing most of the work for us anyways. So when you take something like Holy Basil that's going to nurture your thyroid, that's going to help your adrenals, it's going to help regulate your cortisol and modulate your whole body's response to stressors, now you've gotten the magic bullet. Now you've gotten the limitless pill. Now you've gotten something that actually works. Now you're on the right track.